They say the eyes are the window to the soul. But what happens when those eyes reveal a beast? When a servant girl's defiance pushes a cruel master too far, and her punishment awakens something ancient, something powerful, something that should have remained hidden in the shadows of her bloodline. This is the story of Geneviève, a girl with nothing but her pride, and everything to lose. Before we begin, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now. Not later. Not after the story. Because what you're about to hear will change how you see every werewolf story that comes after it. And when you subscribe, you're joining a pack. My pack. Of listeners who crave stories that bite deep and don't let go. Ring that notification bell too, because I promise you won't want to miss what's coming next. And here's something special. Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. Drop it in the comments below. Whether you're in Paris, New York, Lagos, or Tokyo, I want to know where my pack members are hiding. Let's build a community that spans the globe, united by our love for stories that make our hearts race and our spirits soar. Now let's begin. The Château de Montclair stood like a stone sentinel against the grey autumn sky, its towers piercing the clouds that rolled in from the northern territories. For 200 years, the Montclair family had ruled these lands with an iron fist wrapped in velvet gloves. They were nobility, yes, but more than that, they were wolves. Wolfes. The kind of bloodline that could trace its ancestry back to the first shifters who walked the forests of ancient Gaul. And in the kitchens of that great chateau, among the steam and smoke and endless labor, worked a girl named Geneviève. She was 17, though the hardness in her green eyes made her seem older. Her dark hair, the color of wet earth, was always tied back in a severe braid that hung between her shoulder blades. Her hands were rough from work, scarred from burns and cuts that came from a lifetime of service. She'd been born on the estate, the daughter of servants who had died when she was 12. Her mother from fever, her father from a hunting accident that everyone whispered wasn't quite an accident at all. Geneviève had survived by keeping her head down and her mouth shut. But there was something in her that wouldn't quite break, no matter how hard they tried. The young master of the house was named Thibault Montclair. He was 24, handsome in the way that predators are handsome, all sharp angles and calculated grace. His hair was dark gold, his eyes the amber of old honey, and when he smiled, you could see the wolf in him even without the shift. He'd inherited the estate when his father died 3 years prior, and he'd ruled it with cruelty masked as discipline. Thibault enjoyed reminding the servants of their place. He enjoyed it a little too much. It was a Tuesday morning when everything changed. The kind of morning that starts ordinary and ends in blood. Geneviève had been assigned to clean the great hall, a massive room with vaulted ceilings and portraits of dead Montclairs staring down with judgmental eyes. She was on her hands and knees, scrubbing the marble floor, when Thibault entered with his beta, a brutish man named Romain. "Is the floor clean enough to eat from?" Thibault asked, his boots clicking across the marble. Geneviève didn't look up. "Yes, Master Thibault. Let's test that, shall we?" She heard the smile in his voice before she saw what he did. Thibault lifted a crystal goblet from the sideboard and turned it upside down, pouring red wine across the section she'd just cleaned. The liquid spread like blood across the white marble, seeping into the grout. "Clumsy me," Thibault said. "Clean it again." Genevieve's hands tightened on the scrub brush, but she nodded. "Yes, Master Thibault." She fetched fresh water and began scrubbing at the wine stain. Behind her, she could hear Thibault and Romain talking in low voices, discussing some business with the northern packs. Something about territory disputes and marriage alliances. She tried not to listen. Servants who heard too much had a habit of disappearing. But then Romain said something that made her freeze. "The girl's mother was a half-breed, wasn't she?" "That's what I heard. Tried to hide it, but your father sniffed her out." "Indeed," Thibault replied. "Father enjoyed his little executions. Kept the servants in line." Genevieve's father hadn't died in a hunting accident. He'd been murdered. And her mother. Her hand slipped on the wet marble. The bucket tipped, sending water flooding across the floor, drenching Thibault's expensive leather boots. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes thunder. "Ooh, stupid girl." Thibault's voice was soft, which made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. Geneviève scrambled to her feet, her dress soaked, her heart hammering. "I'm sorry, Master Thibault, I didn't mean." "Didn't mean." He took a step toward her, and she could smell the wolf in him rising, that musk of dominance and barely controlled violence. "You didn't mean to ruin my boots. You didn't mean to waste water. You didn't mean to be the most incompetent servant in this entire household. It was an accident." "Silence." The word cracked through the air like a whip. Genevieve's mouth snapped shut, but her eyes stayed locked on his. And that was her first mistake. A servant never holds an alpha's gaze. Thibault's amber eyes flashed with rage. "You dare look at me like that? You dare show defiance in my own home?" "I wasn't." "Romain," Thibault said quietly. "Fetch the whip from the stables." Genevieve's blood turned to ice. "No. Please, Master Thibault. You will learn respect," he said. "Or you will learn pain. Perhaps both." Romain returned within minutes, carrying a leather riding whip, the kind used to control horses that misbehaved. Thibault took it, testing its weight, letting it whistle through the air. The sound alone made Geneviève flinch. "Turn around," Thibault commanded. She didn't move. Couldn't move. Her body had locked up with fear, with rage, with something deeper she didn't understand. "I said turn around." "No." The word left her mouth before she could stop it. It hung in the air between them like a thrown gauntlet. Thibault's eyebrows rose. "What did you say?" "I said no." Genevieve's voice was shaking, but she couldn't back down now. Wouldn't. Something inside her was rising, something hot and fierce and utterly unfamiliar. "My parents gave their lives to this house. I've served faithfully for years. I made a mistake. I apologized. I don't deserve to be whipped like an animal." "You are an animal," Thibault snarled. "We all are. But some of us are predators and some are prey. Know your place." He grabbed her arm, spinning her around, and before she could react, the whip cracked across her back. The pain was immediate and absolute. It felt like being cut open from shoulder to hip, like fire and ice and every terrible thing concentrated into one line of agony. Geneviève bit down on her tongue to keep from screaming, tasting blood. The whip came down again. Then again. "Will you learn respect?" Thibault demanded. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Through gritted teeth she said, "You can't beat respect into someone. Then I'll beat obedience into you instead." The fourth strike was the one that did it. Something inside Geneviève snapped. Not broke. Snapped like a chain that had been stretched too tight, like a lock finally giving way. Heat exploded through her body, racing along her veins like wildfire. Her vision blurred, then sharpened until she could see individual dust motes hanging in the air, could smell Thibault's sweat and Romain's fear and something else, something wild. When she turned to face Thibault, her eyes were no longer green. They were gold. Pure molten gold. Alpha gold. Thibault stumbled backward, the whip falling from his nerveless fingers. "Impossible," he whispered. Geneviève didn't understand what was happening. Her body felt too small for her skin, too tight, like something vast and powerful was trying to claw its way out. Her gums ached where her teeth were trying to lengthen into fangs. Her fingernails felt like they were peeling away to make room for claws. "She's shifting," Romain shouted. "Master, she's. I can see what she's doing, you fool." Thibault's shock was giving way to something more dangerous. Calculation. She's been hiding it. All this time she's been hiding what she is. "But the eyes," Romain breathed. "Only alphas have gold eyes. How can a servant girl?" "Get the silver chains," Thibault ordered. "Now!" But Geneviève wasn't staying to be chained. The instinct to run, to survive, was overwhelming everything else. She bolted for the door, moving faster than she'd ever moved in her life, fast enough that the world blurred around her. She heard shouting behind her, heard Thibault calling for the guards, But she was already out the door across the courtyard, heading for the tree line that marked the edge of the estate. The forest. She had to reach the forest. Her body was changing as she ran, bones cracking and reforming, muscles stretching and strengthening. It hurt. God, it hurt, but it also felt like being born, like becoming something she was always meant to be. By the time she hit the tree line, she was on all fours, her servant's dress hanging in tatters from a body that was no longer entirely human. She was a wolf. A massive gray and black wolf with eyes that burned like captured sunlight. And she was running for her life. The forest beyond the Montclair estate was old. The kind of old that predated kingdoms, that remembered when gods walked the earth and magic was as common as breathing. The trees grew so thick that their branches wove together overhead, creating a twilight world where time moved differently and the rules of civilization held no sway. Geneviève ran until her legs gave out, until her lungs burned and her paws bled. Then she collapsed in a small clearing beside a stream, her body shaking with exhaustion and shock. What was she? The question echoed in her mind as she lay there, watching steam rise from her fur in the cool autumn air. She'd lived 17 years as a human, as a servant, as someone so far beneath notice that she might as well have been invisible. Now she was this thing, this monster. Oh, not a monster. A werewolf. She'd served the Montclairs long enough to know what that meant. Werewolves were ruled by pack hierarchy, by bloodlines and dominance. Alphas at the top, betas in the middle, omegas at the bottom. She'd always assumed she was human, that her parents had been human, that the wolves were something other, something she could never be. But her eyes had turned gold. And gold meant alpha. Didn't make sense. Alpha wolves were born, not made. They came from powerful bloodlines, from families that had ruled for generations. They didn't emerge from the servant quarters of a chateau, didn't spend their childhoods scrubbing floors and emptying chamber pots. Unless her mother really had been a half-breed. Unless she'd been hiding something more than just her wolf blood. Unless Genevieve's bloodline was more complicated than she'd ever imagined. The sound of baying hounds jerked her from her thoughts. They were hunting her. Course they were. Thibault couldn't allow a rogue alpha to escape, especially not one who knew the secrets of his house. She'd be a threat to everything he was, everything he'd built. He wouldn't stop until she was dead or collared. Geneviève forced herself to stand, her wolf body responding despite its exhaustion. She had to keep moving, had to get deeper into the forest, had to. Easy there, little alpha. She spun, lips pulling back from her fangs, a growl rumbling deep in her chest. A man, no, a wolf, stepped from between the trees. He was tall and lean, with silver hair despite appearing to be in his 40s, and eyes that were the pale blue of winter ice. He held up his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said calmly. "My name is Étienne. I've been watching the Montclair estate for weeks now, waiting for something interesting to happen. I'd say a new alpha awakening certainly qualifies." Geneviève snarled, her hackles raised. She didn't know how to speak in this form, didn't know how to do anything except react on instinct, and her instinct said this stranger was dangerous. "You don't trust me," Étienne observed. "Smart. But those hounds are getting closer, and you don't know the forest like I do. So I'm going to make you a deal. Come with me, let me hide your scent, and I'll explain what you are and why Thibault Montclair is so terrified of you. Refuse, and you can take your chances with a hunting party. Your choice." The baying grew louder. Geneviève could hear men shouting, could smell smoke from their torches. She didn't trust this Étienne, but she trusted Thibault even less. She gave a short nod. "Good girl. Now follow me, and step exactly where I step." Étienne moved through the forest like water, like smoke, like he was part of it rather than just walking through it. Geneviève followed, her paws landing in the exact spots his boots had touched. After a few minutes, she realized what he was doing, masking her scent with his own, creating a false trail that would confuse the hounds. They walked for what felt like hours, deep into the forest's heart, until they reached a small cottage built against the side of a hill. It looked abandoned, the kind of place humans would call haunted, but Geneviève could smell that it was lived in, that Étienne had made this place his home. "Shift back," Étienne instructed. "I know you don't know how, but focus on your human form. Remember what it felt like to have hands instead of paws, to stand on 2 legs instead of 4. The shift is as much about intent as anything else." Geneviève closed her eyes and tried. First, nothing happened. Then, slowly, painfully, she felt her bones beginning to reshape. The transformation back to human hurt even more than the shift to wolf had, like her body was being forced into a mold that no longer quite fit. But eventually, she stood on 2 legs again, naked and shaking, her back still bleeding from the whip marks. Étienne tossed her a blanket without looking, then disappeared inside the cottage. He returned with a rough-spun dress. "Put this on. Then we'll talk." Once she was clothed, once she was sitting by the fire inside the cottage with a cup of tea warming her hands, Étienne finally explained. "Your mother," he said, "was not just a half-breed. She was the daughter of an Alpha from the Beauvoir pack, one of the oldest bloodlines in France. When she fell in love with your father, a human, her pack exiled her. The Montclairs took her in, but only because Thibault's father enjoyed having leverage over powerful wolves. He kept her secret, but he also kept her trapped." "Why didn't she tell me?" Geneviève whispered. "Because she was trying to protect you. If anyone knew what you were, you'd become a pawn in pack politics. Or worse, someone would try to force you into a mating bond to strengthen their bloodline. Your mother hoped that if she never awakened your wolf, you could live a simple life. A safe life. Then why did I shift? Why now? Trauma. Rage. Fear. The triggers vary, but strong emotion can force a dormant wolf to surface. Thibault pushed you too far, and your wolf decided it was time to survive." Geneviève stared into the fire, watching the flames dance. "What do I do now?" "Now." Étienne leaned back in his chair. "Now you have 3 choices. 1, you can run. Leave France entirely. Start over somewhere your bloodline doesn't matter. 2, you can challenge Thibault for his pack. You're an alpha, you have that right. Or 3." He paused, studying her face. 3, you can let me train you. Teach you to control your wolf, to understand pack politics, to become the kind of alpha who doesn't just survive, but thrives." "Why would you help me?" "Because I owe your mother a debt," Étienne said quietly. "I was there the night she was exiled. I was young, too weak to stand up to my alpha, too afraid to do what was right. I've regretted it every day since. This is my chance to make amends." Geneviève looked at this strange silver-haired wolf, this man who claimed to want to help her, and made her decision. "Teach me," she said. "Teach me everything." The weeks that followed were the hardest of Genevieve's life, and that was saying something for a girl who'd spent years in servitude. Étienne was a brutal teacher. He woke her before dawn and worked her until long after dusk, teaching her to shift at will, to control the rage that came with her wolf, to hunt and fight and survive. He taught her that being an alpha wasn't just about having gold eyes and dominant blood. It was about leadership, about strategy, about knowing when to fight and when to retreat. "An alpha who relies only on brute strength is a dead alpha," he told her one morning as they sparred in the clearing. He'd shifted into his wolf form, and though his eyes were only green, a beta, he moved with the confidence of someone who'd survived decades of pack politics. Geneviève lunged, jaws snapping, but Étienne sidestepped easily and used her momentum against her, sending her tumbling into a pile of leaves. "You're too predictable," he said as she picked herself up. "You telegraph every move. An enemy will see you coming from a mile away." "Then teach me not to be predictable," she growled. "I'm trying. You're just not listening." They went again, and again, and again, until Genevieve's muscles screamed and her lungs burned and she wanted nothing more than to collapse. But she didn't. Because every time she felt like quitting, she remembered Thibault's whip, remembered her parents' deaths, remembered that somewhere out there, the Montclairs were still looking for her. Between training sessions, Étienne taught her about pack politics, about the complex web of alliances and enmities that governed wolf society. About the Council of Alphas that met once a year to settle disputes and establish territories. About the old laws that predated France itself, laws that even the strongest alphas couldn't break without consequences. The most important law, he explained one evening as they sat by the fire, is this: an alpha cannot kill another alpha without just cause. If they do, the council will hunt them down and execute them. It's the only thing that keeps us from tearing each other apart. What counts as just cause? Self-defense. Protecting your pack. Or, he paused. Or if an alpha has been challenged to formal combat and loses. That's the traditional way to settle disputes between alphas. A duel, Geneviève said slowly. Exactly. To the death, or until one surrenders. The winner takes the loser's pack and territory. Could I challenge Thibault? You could. But you'd likely die. He's been alpha for 3 years. He's fought challenges before and won. You've been a wolf for 3 weeks. Then I'll train until I'm ready. Étienne smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. That's the spirit. But there's more to being an alpha than just winning fights. You need to understand your pack, understand what they need and fear and desire. A good alpha serves their pack as much as the pack serves them. Thibault doesn't serve anyone but himself. Which is why his pack hates him. Which is why, if you're smart, you could turn that hatred into an advantage. As autumn turned to winter, Geneviève grew stronger. Her shifts became smooth and effortless. Her senses sharpened until she could track a rabbit through the forest by scent alone, could hear a mouse's heartbeat from 20 paces away. She learned to fight not just with claws and fangs, but with strategy and cunning. But more importantly, she learned to think like an alpha. One snowy evening, as they sat inside the cottage with wind howling outside, Étienne said, "It's time." Geneviève looked up from the book she'd been reading, a history of the old packs, written in cramped French that made her eyes ache. "Time for what?" "Time for you to go back." Her heart stuttered. "To the chateau." "Not to serve," Étienne said. "To reclaim. Thibault has been spreading rumors about you. Calling you a rogue, a mad wolf who murdered a guard before escaping into the forest. He's turned you into a cautionary tale to keep the other servants in line. But rumors are a double-edged sword. They can also make you into a legend. I don't want to be a legend. I just want to be free. You'll never be free as long as Thibault is hunting you. And he is hunting you, Geneviève. He's hired trackers from the southern packs. It's only a matter of time before they find this place. So you have 2 choices. Run forever or stand and fight. She knew he was right. She'd known it for weeks, but had been avoiding the truth. Thibault would never stop. He couldn't afford to, not when she represented everything he feared. A challenge to his authority, proof that alphas could come from anywhere, even the servant quarters. "If I challenge him," she said slowly, "and I lose, then you die. And I'll make sure you get a proper burial, for what that's worth. And if I win, then you become the alpha of the Montclair pack. You take the chateau, the lands, everything Thibault has built. But more than that," Étienne leaned forward, his winter blue eyes intense. "You become a symbol, an alpha who rose from nothing. Every servant, every omega, every wolf who's ever been told they're not good enough will look to you and see hope. That's a lot of weight to carry. Being an alpha always is. But I've watched you these past months, Geneviève. You have something Thibault will never have. You have empathy. You understand suffering because you've lived it. That makes you dangerous to tyrants like him." Geneviève stood, walked to the window, and stared out at the snow-covered forest. Somewhere beyond those trees was the chateau, the place where she'd been born, where she'd served, where she'd been whipped for daring to show defiance. Where she would return as an alpha. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Tomorrow," Étienne said. "At dawn. I'll go with you as far as the estate boundaries, but after that, you're on your own. This is your challenge, your fight. I can't interfere." "I understand." That night, Geneviève barely slept. She kept thinking about what was coming, about the possibility that tomorrow she might die. She'd lived 17 years expecting nothing, hoping for nothing, and now she was about to risk everything for a chance at something more. But wasn't that what life was? Wasn't it better to die on your feet than live on your knees? As dawn broke, cold and clear, she and Étienne set out through the forest. They didn't speak much, but the silence was comfortable, the silence of two wolves who understood each other. When they reached the edge of the Montclair lands, Étienne stopped. "This is where I leave you," he said. "Remember everything I taught you. Keep your center. Don't let rage control you. And whatever happens," he gripped her shoulder, "your mother would be proud of you." Geneviève felt tears sting her eyes, but she blinked them back. "Thank you. For everything. Survive today and you can thank me later. Now go. Show Thibault Montclair what real strength looks like." She shifted into her wolf form and ran toward the chateau, toward her destiny, toward whatever end awaited her there. The sun was barely above the horizon when Geneviève emerged from the tree line. She'd shifted back to human form before leaving the forest, wanting to walk through those gates on two legs, wearing the dress of a servant but carrying herself like an alpha. The guards at the gate recognized her immediately. She saw their eyes widen, saw them reach for their weapons. "I'm here to see Thibault Montclair," she said, her voice calm and clear. "Tell him that Geneviève Beauvoir has returned to issue a formal challenge." Beauvoir, her mother's name. The name of the pack that had exiled her, but also the name that carried the weight of an alpha bloodline. One of the guards ran toward the chateau while the other kept his weapon trained on her. "Don't move," he ordered. "I'm not going anywhere," Geneviève replied. "Not until this is finished." More guards arrived. Then servants, drawn by the commotion. She recognized faces in the crowd, people she'd worked alongside, people who'd seen her whipped and said nothing. But she also saw something in their eyes now. Not pity. Not contempt. Oh. Thibault appeared on the chateau steps, flanked by Romain and two other wolves she didn't recognize. He was dressed in fine clothes, his hair perfectly styled, but she could see the fury in his amber eyes. "So," he called out, "the little servant has returned. Did you miss scrubbing floors?" "I've returned to issue a formal challenge," Geneviève said, pitching her voice to carry. "By the old laws, by the rights of alpha blood, I challenge you, Thibault Montclair, for leadership of this pack." A murmur ran through the crowd. Formal challenges were rare. Most disputes were settled through negotiation or, if necessary, assassination. But a public challenge? That hadn't happened in decades. Thibault's smile was vicious. "You think you can challenge me? You who've been a wolf for all of 3 months. You don't even have a pack, girl. You're nothing but a rogue with delusions of grandeur." "I have alpha blood," Geneviève said. "That's all I need. Do you accept, or will you prove yourself a coward in front of everyone?" That did it. Thibault's smile disappeared, replaced by cold rage. "I accept your challenge. We fight at noon in the old circle. To the death." "To the death," Geneviève echoed. The crowd dispersed slowly, people whispering and casting glances over their shoulders. Geneviève was escorted to a small room and locked inside, not out of fear she'd escape, but because tradition dictated that combatants must be separated before a formal challenge. She spent the hours until noon in meditation, focusing on her breathing, on her center, on everything Étienne had taught her. She couldn't afford to let fear or doubt creep in. She had to be calm, focused, ready for anything. When the guards came to collect her, the sun was high overhead. The old circle was exactly that, a ring of ancient standing stones in a clearing behind the chateau. This place was older than the Montclair family, older than France itself. It was said that the first werewolves had conducted their challenges here, that the stones themselves remembered every drop of blood spilled in combat. The entire household had gathered to watch. Servants, guards, wolves from the pack, everyone who served or feared or hated Thibault Montclair was there. Geneviève could feel their eyes on her as she walked to the circle's center. Thibault was already waiting, already shifted into his wolf form. He was massive, easily twice her size, with fur the color of dark honey and those burning amber eyes. When he snarled, she could see every one of his fangs, each as long as her finger. An elderly wolf stepped forward, the pack's lawkeeper, the one who would officiate the challenge. "The challenge has been issued and accepted," he intoned. "The combat will continue until one combatant yields or dies. There will be no interference, no mercy. The victor takes the pack. These are the old laws. Let all present bear witness." He stepped back. Thibault lunged immediately, no preamble, no posturing. He was a blur of golden fur and snapping jaws, moving with the confidence of a wolf who'd never lost a fight. But Geneviève had been expecting it. She shifted mid-dodge, her human body becoming wolf between one heartbeat and the next, and Thibault's jaws closed on empty air where she'd been standing. They circled each other, two alphas in the ancient ring, while the crowd held its breath. Thibault attacked again, and this time Geneviève met him head-on. They collided with bone-jarring force, claws and fangs seeking flesh. She felt his teeth scrape her shoulder, felt pain bloom hot and immediate. But she also felt her own jaws close on his foreleg, felt bone crack beneath the pressure. Thibault howled and pulled back, limping now. His golden eyes filled with rage and something else. Surprise. He'd expected an easy victory. Expected to crush this upstart servant girl within minutes. But she was holding her own, and more, she was hurting him. They fought with savage intensity, tearing chunks from each other's flesh, blood spattering the ancient stones. Geneviève drew on everything Étienne had taught her, using speed where Thibault had strength, using strategy where he had size. When he lunged high, she went low. When he tried to use his weight to pin her, she twisted away and struck at his exposed flanks. But he was strong, so terribly strong, and every blow from his massive paws felt like being hit with a hammer. She felt ribs crack, felt her leg go numb where his claws had raked deep. The pain was excruciating, but she couldn't stop, couldn't slow down, because to hesitate was to die. The fight raged on, minutes bleeding into each other, until both wolves were exhausted and bleeding, their fur matted with blood and torn flesh. Thibault tried one final attack, lunging for her throat with his jaws wide. It was a desperate move, the kind that would either end the fight immediately or leave him fatally exposed. Geneviève had been waiting for desperation. She dropped low, letting his momentum carry him over her, and then she struck upward, her jaws closing around his throat. Not the killing bite. Not yet, but enough to make him freeze, enough to make him understand that she could end this with one flex of her jaw. The clearing went silent. Slowly, deliberately, Thibault's body went limp in the traditional gesture of surrender. But Geneviève could feel the tension in his muscles, could sense that he was preparing to turn this into a betrayal, to strike the moment she released him. He'd never intended to honor the surrender, so she didn't give him the chance. She bit down. Thibault's dying howl echoed off the standing stones, a sound of fury and disbelief that he was actually dying, that this servant girl had actually beaten him. His blood flooded hot into Genevieve's mouth, and she held on until his struggles weakened, until his heartbeat stuttered and stopped, until the light faded from those amber eyes. Only then did she release him and step back, shifting to human form despite the agony in her body, wanting them to see her as she was, bloodied and barely standing, but alive but victorious. "It's done," the lawkeeper announced, his voice shaking. "Château de Montclair is dead. By the old laws, Geneviève Boisvert is alpha of this pack." The silence stretched for one more heartbeat. Then someone, a servant girl Geneviève barely knew, began to howl. Not a howl of mourning, but of triumph. Others joined in, a chorus of voices rising to the gray sky, celebrating not just a new alpha, but the death of a tyrant. Geneviève stood in the center of the ancient circle, covered in blood, barely able to stand, and felt something settle into place inside her. This pack was hers now. These people were hers. The responsibility was enormous, terrifying. But she was ready for it. The first thing Geneviève did as alpha was release all the servants from their binding contracts. Anyone who wanted to leave could leave, with a purse of gold and her blessing. Anyone who wanted to stay would be paid fair wages and treated with respect. Nearly all of them stayed. The second thing she did was exile Romain and the other wolves who had enabled Thibault's cruelty. She could have killed them, could have used the old laws to justify executing them for their crimes, but she chose mercy instead. Let them wander as rogues. Let them live with the knowledge that they'd been defeated by someone they'd once considered beneath them. The third thing she did was send a message to the Council of Alphas, informing them of the challenge and its outcome. By law, they had to acknowledge her claim or send someone to contest it. 3 weeks later the reply came. An elderly alpha named Margot arrived at the chateau with a small entourage. She was ancient, her hair white as snow, but her eyes were the gold of someone who'd held power for longer than Geneviève had been alive. She'd ruled the Loire Valley Pax for 40 years, and her word carried weight in the council. Geneviève received her in the great hall, the same hall where she'd once scrubbed floors, where Thibault had poured wine across her work, where everything had begun. "So," Margot said, studying her with those golden eyes, "you're the servant girl who killed Château de Montclair." "I'm the alpha who won a formal challenge," Geneviève replied evenly. "There's a difference." "Is there?" Margot settled into a chair without being invited, the casual dominance of someone who'd never had to ask permission for anything. "Tell me, girl, why did you challenge him? Was it revenge, ambition, or something else?" Geneviève could have lied, could have said all the right things about honor and justice and the old ways. But something in Margot's gaze told her that lies would be seen through immediately. "All of those things," she said honestly. "I wanted revenge for what he did to me, to my parents, to everyone who suffered under his rule. I wanted to prove that I wasn't nothing, that my blood and my mother's sacrifice meant something. And yes, I wanted power. Not for power's sake, but because I knew I could lead this pack better than he ever did." Margot's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "At least you're honest. That's rare in one so young. Tell me, what do you know about your mother's pack?" "The Boisvert pack. Only what Étienne told me. That they exiled her for loving a human." "Étienne Moreau is still alive." Margot's eyebrows rose. "I thought he'd died years ago." "He was always too soft for pack politics. He saved my life. Trained me. Then he's wiser than I gave him credit for." Margot stood, walking to the window to look out over the estate. "The Boisvert pack is gone now. They were wiped out 6 years ago in a territory war with the Germans. Your mother's brother, your uncle, was the last alpha, and he died without heirs. Their lands went to the victors. Their bloodline ended." Geneviève felt a pang of loss for family she'd never known, for connections that had been severed before she could understand what she'd lost. "But bloodlines are strange things," Margot continued. "They have a way of persisting even when we think they're extinguished. You carry the Boisvert blood, which means you carry their claim to those lost territories. With the right alliances, the right strategy, you could reclaim what was taken from your family." "I'm not interested in expanding territory," Geneviève said. "I have enough to manage here. For now, perhaps, but the world of alphas is not a static thing. It's a constant dance of power and influence, and those who stand still get trampled. You've made waves by killing Thibault, girl. People are watching you, wondering what you'll do next. Some see opportunity, others see threat. And what do you see?" Margot turned from the window, her golden eyes assessing. "I see potential. Raw, unrefined, but undeniable. I also see someone who's about to make a great many mistakes unless she accepts guidance. Are you offering to be my mentor? I'm offering to keep you alive long enough to learn from your mistakes. There's a difference." Margot moved toward the door, then paused. "The council has accepted your claim as alpha of the Montclair pack. But they've also issued a summons. You're required to attend the next gathering in 3 months' time. There you'll take your formal oath and meet the other alphas who rule France. I suggest you prepare yourself. They'll be far less forgiving than I am." After Margot left, Geneviève found herself standing alone in the great hall, the weight of what she'd taken on pressing down on her shoulders. She'd won her freedom, won her revenge, won a pack and a territory and everything that came with it. But she'd also painted a target on her back. That evening, she found Étienne waiting for her in the gardens. He'd been staying at the chateau as her guest, helping her navigate the complex politics of pack management. "You heard?" she asked, sitting beside him on a stone bench. Margot made sure everyone heard. "She's not subtle." Étienne smiled slightly. "Oh, the council gathering. Are you nervous?" "Terrified," Geneviève admitted. "I barely know how to be an alpha for this pack. How am I supposed to stand among wolves who've ruled for decades? The same way you stood against Thibault. With courage, with honesty, and with the knowledge that your blood is just as good as theirs." He turned to face her fully. "You're not a servant anymore, Geneviève. You need to stop thinking like one. You're an alpha now. Act like it. What if I'm not good enough? Then you'll learn. That's what leadership is. A constant process of learning and adapting. But I've watched you these past months. I've seen how the pack responds to you. How you've earned their loyalty not through fear but through respect. You're already a better alpha than Thibault ever was." Geneviève looked up at the chateau, at the warm lights glowing in the windows, at the home she'd served and now ruled. "My mother wanted me to have a simple life. A safe life." "Your mother wanted you to survive," Étienne corrected gently. "And you have. But more than that, you've thrived. You've become something she could never have imagined. Don't diminish that by wishing you were someone else." He was right. She knew he was right. But knowing and believing were two different things. Over the next 3 months, Geneviève threw herself into preparing for the council gathering. She studied the histories of the major packs, memorized the names and faces of the sitting alphas, learned the intricate protocols that governed formal wolf society. She also continued to strengthen her pack, improving conditions for the servants, establishing fair trade agreements with neighboring territories, and training a new generation of wolves who understood that strength came from unity, not tyranny. She also dealt with challenges to her authority. A young wolf named Luke thought he could take the pack from her through combat. She broke his arm in 3 places and sent him limping back to his family with a warning that mercy was a gift she'd only give once. A visiting alpha from Marseille tried to intimidate her during trade negotiations. She shifted mid-conversation and had him by the throat before he could blink, proving that she might be young but she was no one's victim. Word spread. The servant girl who'd become an alpha. The wolf with golden eyes who'd killed Château de Montclair in single combat. The new power rising in the north. Some called her inspiring. Others called her dangerous. Geneviève didn't care what they called her, as long as they respected her pack. When the day finally came to leave for the council gathering, she dressed in fine clothes that felt foreign on her body, silk and velvet where she'd once worn rough cotton, jewels at her throat where she'd once worn bruises. She looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. "You look like an alpha," Étienne said from the doorway. "I look like I'm playing dress-up. Then play the part until it becomes real. That's what we all do." The council gathering was held at an ancient castle in the Loire Valley, a place that predated Christianity, where the old magic still hummed in the stones. Alphas came from all over France, each with their entourage, each radiating power and confidence. Geneviève felt like a child among giants. The first evening was a formal dinner, all the alphas seated at a massive table in a hall lit by 1,000 candles. Geneviève had been placed between Margot and a younger alpha named Sebastian who ruled the southern territories. "So you're the famous servant alpha," Sebastian said, his tone making it unclear whether that was a compliment or an insult. He was handsome in a sharp-featured way, with dark hair and eyes the color of amber. "I've been curious to meet you." "I'm not famous," Geneviève replied. "I'm just trying to do right by my pack. Modest too. How refreshing." He leaned closer. "Tell me, do you actually believe you can hold the Montclair territory? Or are you just keeping it warm until someone stronger comes along?" "I killed Château de Montclair in single combat," Geneviève said quietly. "Do you think you're stronger than he was?" Sebastian's smile widened. I like you. You have teeth. Most new alphas are too busy trying to make alliances to stand up for themselves. I'm not most alphas. No, he agreed. You're certainly not. The formal part of the gathering began the next day. Each alpha who'd come into power since the last gathering had to step forward and swear their oath before the council. When Genevieve's turn came, she walked to the center of the hall, acutely aware of every eye on her. The eldest alpha, a man named Edmund who'd ruled for over 60 years, administered the oath. Do you swear to uphold the old laws? He asked. I do. Do you swear to protect your pack, even at the cost of your own life? I do. Do you swear to honor the council's authority and submit to their judgment in matters of law? Geneviève hesitated. Submitting to anyone's judgment went against every instinct she'd developed. But she also understood that the council was what kept wolf society from descending into chaos. It was the check against tyrants, the balance against unlimited power. I do, she said. Then by the old laws and the old ways, I recognize you as Alpha of the Montclair pack. May you rule with wisdom and strength. The hall erupted in howls, the traditional wolf approval. Geneviève howled with them, feeling something profound settle in her chest. It was official now. She wasn't just a servant girl who'd gotten lucky. She was an alpha, recognized by the highest authority in wolf society. But the real test came later, during the private councils where the alphas discussed territories and disputes and the future of their kind. An alpha named Theodore from the Eastern Territories raised a challenge. I question whether someone so young, so inexperienced, should hold a territory as valuable as the Montclair lands, he said. Perhaps it would be better to divide those lands among more established packs. Are you challenging my right to rule? Geneviève asked, her voice calm despite the fury building inside her. I'm questioning your competence. Then let me clarify something. Geneviève stood, meeting his gaze directly. I didn't ask for this power. I didn't scheme or plot or manipulate my way into it. I earned it through blood and combat, the oldest and most honest way. Thibault Montclair was a tyrant who abused his pack, and I ended his reign. If you think you could do better, if you think you have the right to take what I've won, then issue a formal challenge. Otherwise, sit down and stop wasting everyone's time. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Margot began to laugh, a sound like breaking glass. The girl has a point, Theodore. You can't question her competence without questioning the validity of the old laws themselves. And I don't think any of us want to open that particular door. Other alphas murmured agreement. Theodore's face reddened, but he sat down without another word. After the council session ended, several alphas approached Geneviève privately. Some offered congratulations. Others offered alliances. A few offered warnings about making enemies too quickly. But the one who surprised her most was Sebastian. Walk with me, he suggested, gesturing toward the castle gardens. They walked in silence for a while, the night air cool against Genevieve's skin. Finally Sebastian spoke. You embarrassed Theodore in there. He won't forget that. He tried to steal my territory. I won't forget that either. Fair enough. Sebastian plucked a flower from a nearby bush, studying it. I'm going to give you some advice, whether you want it or not. You're strong, Geneviève. Stronger than you know. But strength alone won't keep you safe in this world. You need allies. Real allies. Not just wolves who smile while plotting against you. Are you offering to be my ally? I'm offering to be honest with you, which is rarer and more valuable. The council accepted you because you followed the laws. But many of the alphas here resent you. They see you as an upstart, a reminder that the old bloodlines aren't as secure as they'd like to believe. Some will try to destroy you through politics. Others will try more direct methods. Then I'll deal with them as they come. That's what I'm counting on. He handed her the flower, a white rose with thorns. You remind me of this. Beautiful and dangerous. The world needs more alphas like you. Geneviève took the flower, studying his face for signs of deception. But all she saw was sincerity and maybe something else. Interest. Attraction. She couldn't tell. "Thank you," she said. "For the warning. And the flower. Don't thank me yet. The real challenges are still coming." He was right, of course. The council gathering was just the beginning. The months following the council gathering were a whirlwind of activity. Geneviève returned to the chateau with new knowledge, new contacts, and a clearer understanding of the complex web of power that governed wolf society. She used that knowledge to strengthen her position, forming careful alliances with alphas who shared her vision of leadership based on merit rather than tradition. But she also made enemies. Theodore, true to Sebastian's warning, spent those months undermining her in council correspondence, questioning her decisions, trying to isolate her politically. Other alphas, seeing weakness in her youth, tested her borders with raids and provocations. Each time, Geneviève responded swiftly and decisively. She couldn't afford to show weakness, couldn't afford to let anyone think she was easy prey. She led hunting parties that drove off intruders. She negotiated treaties that secured her borders. She built her pack into something stronger, more unified than it had been under Thibault's rule. But leadership was exhausting in ways she'd never anticipated. Every decision affected dozens of lives. Every mistake could be fatal. She found herself lying awake at night, second-guessing her choices, wondering if she was doing enough, if she was doing it right. One evening, 6 months after becoming Alpha, she stood on the chateau's highest tower, looking out over her territory. The land stretched to the horizon, forests and fields, and the small towns where humans and wolves lived in careful balance. It was beautiful. It was hers. It was terrifying. "You're brooding again." She turned to find Étienne climbing the last stairs to join her. He'd stayed on as her advisor, the only wolf she trusted completely. "I'm thinking," she corrected. "Same thing for you." He leaned against the parapet beside her. "What's troubling you tonight?" "Everything." "Nothing. I don't know," she sighed. "I keep waiting for it to feel real. For me to feel like I actually deserve this. Imposter syndrome. Every leader experiences it. Did Thibault? Thibault was a sociopath. He never questioned whether he deserved power because he believed the world owed him everything." Étienne turned to face her. "You're a better alpha than he was precisely because you do question yourself. Because you care about getting it right. What if caring isn't enough? Then you'll fail, learn and try again. That's what growth looks like." Geneviève smiled despite her melancholy. "You always know what to say. That's because I'm old and wise. Comes with the silver hair." He paused. "There's something else bothering you. I can see it in your eyes." She hesitated, then said, "Sebastian has been writing to me. Frequently. The Southern Alpha. What does he want?" "To court me, I think. Though he's too clever to say it directly. He talks about alliances and trade agreements, but there's something beneath the words. Something more personal. And how do you feel about that?" "Confused. Suspicious. Interested." She laughed at herself. "I don't know. I barely understand how to be an alpha. I certainly don't understand how to navigate romance with someone who might be trying to absorb my territory through marriage." "Welcome to being royalty," Étienne said dryly. "Every relationship is potentially political. Every smile might be a strategy. It's exhausting, which is why most alphas are miserable creatures who die alone and bitter." "That's not very encouraging." "It's not meant to be. I'm telling you the truth." He turned to face her fully. "Here's what I know about Sebastian Rousseau. He's smart, ambitious, and genuinely respected by his pack. He's also been unmarried for 5 years, since his mate died in childbirth. He's not someone who takes relationships lightly. So you think he's serious? I think he sees in you what I see. Someone extraordinary. Someone worth pursuing. Whether that's for political gain or genuine affection." Étienne shrugged. "Time will tell. But Geneviève, you're allowed to want things for yourself. You're allowed to pursue happiness, even if it's complicated. I don't know if I remember how to be happy. Then maybe it's time to learn. Over the following weeks, Geneviève allowed herself to respond to Sebastian's letters with more than just politeness. They wrote about pack management, about the challenges of leadership, about the books they were reading and the changes they were trying to implement in their territories. And gradually, carefully, they wrote about more personal things. Their fears, their hopes, their dreams for a future that might include more than just survival. Sebastian visited the chateau that spring, ostensibly to discuss a trade agreement. But he stayed for 2 weeks, and by the end of those 2 weeks, something had shifted between them. They walked through the gardens one evening, the air sweet with blooming flowers. "Tell me something," Sebastian said. "If you could go back, if you could change what happened with Thibault, would you?" Geneviève considered the question carefully. "A year ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. I would have given anything to go back to being invisible, to being safe. But now..." She looked up at the chateau, at the lights glowing in windows, at the home she'd built from ruins. "Now I think everything happened exactly as it needed to. The suffering made me stronger. The struggle gave me purpose. I wouldn't be who I am without it. And who are you? I'm still figuring that out. Then let me tell you what I see." Sebastian stopped walking, turning to face her. "I see an alpha who inspires loyalty without demanding it. I see a leader who understands that true strength comes from lifting others up, not pushing them down. I see someone who's been through hell and came out the other side with her humanity intact. That's rare, Geneviève. That's extraordinary. You barely know me. I know enough." He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I know that I'd like to know more. Much more." Geneviève felt her heart race, felt the wolf inside her responding to his proximity, to the barely leashed power that radiated from him. "This is complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. What if it doesn't work? What if we try this and it fails and it damages our alliance? Then we'll deal with it like adults." He smiled. "But what if it does work? What if we're stronger together than apart? Isn't that worth the risk?" She thought about spending the rest of her life alone, thought about becoming one of those bitter, isolated alphas Étienne had described. Then she thought about the possibility of something more, something real. "Yes," she said. "It's worth the risk." When he kissed her, it felt like coming home and leaping off a cliff at the same time. Terrifying and perfect and utterly right. The servant who'd been whipped for defiance was gone. In her place stood an alpha who'd been tested by fire and emerged stronger. Geneviève Boisvert ruled the Montclair territory with fairness and strength, had formed alliances that spanned France, and had proven that bloodline mattered less than character. She stood in the great hall, preparing for the annual pack gathering, when a messenger arrived with news from the council. Theodore had died. His pack was in disarray, his territory up for grabs. Several alphas were already positioning themselves to claim it. "What will you do?" Étienne asked. Geneviève thought about her mother, about the Boisvert lands that had been lost, about the cycle of violence and conquest that had defined wolf society for generations. "I'm going to propose something radical to the council," she said. "Instead of letting another territorial war break out, I'm going to suggest we establish the first democratic pack. Let Theodore's wolves choose their own alpha, without interference from outside forces. They'll think you're insane. Maybe. But someone has to break the cycle. Someone has to show there's a better way." She smiled. "Besides, I've got nothing to lose and everything to gain. That's when I'm most dangerous." "That's my girl," Étienne said proudly. Sebastian arrived that evening, traveling from his southern territory to support her proposal. They'd been together for nearly a year now, and though they maintained separate territories, they were building something strong, something that balanced independence with partnership. "Ready to change the world?" he asked, kissing her cheek. "Ready to try," Geneviève replied. That night, as she stood on the tower looking out over her lands, she thought about the girl she'd been. The servant who'd scrubbed floors and kept her eyes down and dreamed of nothing more than survival. That girl was still part of her, would always be part of her. But she was also so much more now. Her eyes flashed gold in the moonlight, alpha eyes, earned through blood and pain and refusing to break when everything tried to crush her. She was Geneviève Boisvert, alpha of the Montclair pack, and she was just getting started. And that, my friends, is where our story ends. But Genevieve's story, that's just beginning. Because the most powerful transformations aren't the ones that happen in a single moment. They're the ones we choose every single day. The decision to be more than what the world tells us we can be. Now, before you go, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, if this story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button. Let me know you were here, that you connected with Genevieve's journey from servant to alpha. Second, subscribe if you haven't already. 'Cause I've got more stories like this coming. Stories about underdogs who become legends, about people who refuse to accept their assigned place in the world, about the power that comes from embracing who you truly are. You don't want to miss what's coming next, trust me. And third, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. We all know someone who's fighting their own battles, who's been told they're not good enough, who needs a reminder that transformation is possible. Be the person who sends them hope wrapped in a story. Remember, tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug. I love hearing where this pack stretches across the globe. Drop it in the comments. Let's celebrate this community we're building together. And finally, let me leave you with this thought. Geneviève didn't become an alpha because she was born special. She became an alpha because when life whipped her down, she got back up with gold in her eyes and fire in her heart. What could